الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الأعظم حجة الله ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب الغرباء، يا مظلوم كربلاء. السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته، السلام على من الإجابة تحت كبته، السلام على ساكن كربلاء. فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي، يا سادتي، فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال مولانا إمام جعفر بن محمد أبي عبد الله وهو أصدق الصادقين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. لا يستغني شيعتنا عن أربع: خمرة يصلي عليها، والخاتم يختم به، والسواك يستاك به، وتربة قبر الحسين عليه السلام. صدق الإمام وآمنا به. زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. Islam as a religion has stated that Salat is one of the most vital aspects in regards to spirituality. In fact, the establishment of the religion is based on Salat. As per the tradition of the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him and his progeny, he states, As-Salat Amudud-Din, that the Salat is the pillar of religion. The word Amud, meaning pole or the central pole upon which the entire Islam is built. If you were to take Islam to be similar to a tent, or you were to compare the deen to a tent, than the establishment of the tent. The tent only remains upright so long as the center pole is upright. If that pole comes down, the entire tent comes crashing down. For the same case with Islam, when Rasulullah says, As-salat amududdin, in that so long as a person's salat is strong, so long as the spirituality and the salat is performed in the way as ordained by the Sharia, as required by the Sharia, the person's religion is intact, his spirituality is intact, his power of resistance against sins is intact. Sometimes a person may come across a difficult period or phase in his time where he sees, while he is accounting himself, self-accounting is an important part of the religion as well, and is an important part towards personal development in terms of spirituality and even in terms of the dunya. In terms of the dunya, it's straightforward that a person evaluates his progress, whether in a business or academically, through a report card. But even spiritually, it is important. In fact, there is a tradition by our seventh Imam, Musa al-Qadim, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Where he states, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُحَاسِبْ نَفْسَهُ. He says, the person who does not account himself is not from us. لَيْسَ مِنَّا. Imam says, he is not from our Shia, as a person who does not take time to account himself at the end of every day or at the beginning of every day. A person takes a moment of his life and contemplates, what am I doing? Where am I going? Islamically, am I maturing or not? It's an important aspect. For this power of resistance, as we were saying, the power of resistance against sin, a person may find during his daily life there is periods of turbulence. There are times where he's extremely spiritual. There are times when the spirituality is at a low. There are times where he is able to resist against sin. There are times where he's very easily dragged into sinning. He doesn't have that power to refrain inside him. And perhaps even worse than that, wal-ayatu billah, is that he finds a sweetness while committing that sin. He enjoys committing that sin. How is this power of resistance built? How is the ugliness of sin manifested? Through salat. If the salat is intact, it is understood as an action, what it represents and what it signifies. This in itself is the similarity or the similitude of a fort. Having said this, no two Muslims will dispute about the fact that salat is one of the most important parts of the religion as per the tradition of Rasulullah. If this is the case, and in addition to that, no two Muslims will dispute on the fact, or no two historians will dispute on the fact that Rasulullah recited Salatul Jama'ah 5 times a day for 13 years in Medina al-Munawwara, at the minimum. If we discount the period of time that Rasulullah recited Salat in Makkah al-Mukarramah, but after Hijrah, what is known amongst the historians is that Rasulullah recited all 5 prayers in Jama'ah, in Masjidun Nabawi, in the presence of a number of companions. If the Holy Prophet prayed Salatul Jama'ah for 13 years, daily, 5 times a day, then us as Muslims, we need to ask ourselves the question, why is it that we differ even on the way that we recite our salat? Why is it that some people fold their hands while some people pray with their hands down? Why is it that some people perform wudu by washing their face only from where the hair begins up till the chin, while other people include perhaps the head and the ears? Why is it that some people wipe their feet and some people wash their feet? Weren't the actions of Rasulullah so cut clear? In the presence of hundreds, if not thousands of companions, Rasulullah performed the same salat, performed the same wudu. Then why these differences across the generations? Even from the actions of salat, the point of discussion today is the act of sajda. Why is it that some people or some sects believe that the sajda must be performed on earth and the preference is given to a turba Husseini, while other sects are of the opinion that no, we can pray on the carpet? These differences and the core reasons of these differences, it is important for every Muslim to study and research about these historical facts, and then for himself make a conscious decision, rational decision as to in which sect does the haqq lie. Because in traditions that are narrated by both the Ahl Shia and the Ahl Sunnah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, has stated that the Muslim Ummah will be divided into 73 sects, 72 of them in hellfire except one. Which is this sect? Everybody claims to be from within the sect. فَعَلَى كُلٍّ, it becomes important for everybody or every Muslim to research into these issues of religion, the differences that arise between the different madhabs from a fiqhi perspective, the differences that lie amongst the different madhabs from an aqa'id perspective need to be researched, need to be understood, and need to be debated in a non-violent and peaceful environment where dialogue is encouraged, such that the path towards truth can be achieved. We said the point of discussion today is the sajda. Shias in particular have been accused of doing shirk or performing shirk because they bow their heads to a stone. This type of misunderstanding is very easy to clear. The sajda is not to the stone. The sajda is on the stone, but to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is seeming like a stone or a tablet of clay, when a person goes down into sajda, anybody who performs the sajda on a piece of turab, is his understanding that I am prostrating or bowing down to this piece of earth? La. The worship is not to the stone. The worship is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but placing the forehead on the earth. So there cannot be an issue of shirk over here. Number two, just like for example, when you look at the Quran, which is in the cover, when the person kisses the cover in which the Quran is bound, is he kissing the cover because of its material? Or is he kissing the intention or the maqsood? The reason that he's kissing the cover is because of the divinity of the book that lies between the cover. Just like the way that cannot be shirk, then this cannot be shirk either. There needs to be rationality, number one. Number two, the person who claims that performing sajda on a turba is bid'ah, himself is guilty of performing bid'ah. Why? When did you find in history that Masjid al-Nabawi had carpets in them? During the time of Rasulullah, Masjid al-Nabawi was not a structure with blocks of stone and cement. The initial masjid on the initial boundary, if you look back into the books of history such as Sirah Halabiyya, you will find that the mosque of Rasulullah was nothing more than the boundary of palm trees, boundaries that were marked by palm trees and then bound together by the leaves of the palm trees. Initially, when Rasulullah built Masjid al-Nabawi, they did not even shade the mosque. There was no canopy of leaves that protected the Muslims from the intensity of the heat and from sometimes the cold of the desert, and even the times that it rained in Medina. You will find a number of historians mention that companions would come and complain to Rasulullah that when we come to recite salat in the mosque, after it has rained, we are forced to perform sajda in mud and our clothes become stained. for the initial or the original building structure of Masjidun Nabawi did not house carpets, did not house cement walls. For then how is this a bid'ah and that is not a bid'ah? If that is the case, and if the emphasis is to follow the sunnah of Rasulullah to the extent that we need to pray like him and not change, then destroy the Masjidun Nabawi and bring back sand inside it. Mentality is not like that, and fiqh does not work like that. When we come and we look at the issue of sajda, Rasulullah being the sahib of the sharia, the one through whom the sharia is conveyed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the imams of Ahlul Bayt who are divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is through them that we understand how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs to be worshipped. Coming back on the issue of this sajda, how did Rasulullah perform his sajda? If he is the Sahibu Sharia and he is the role model through which we are supposed to take the teachings of our religion, it is through him, or it is Rasulullah that we are supposed to emulate in our prayers and in our forms of worship. How did Rasulullah pray? We have established that there was no carpet at the time of Rasulullah in Masjidun Nabawi. For the sujood that was done on the sands. And there are a number of traditions from the books of the Mukhalifin that prove towards this. For the sake of accuracy and the request of masadir, texts or proof, I've narrated down from about maybe 25 narrations, 4 of them or 5 of them, which clearly state that when Rasulullah used to pray, he would put his forehead on the sand or on the earth while performing sajda. The first narration, which is narrated by Abi Humayd as-Sa'idi, and this tradition is mentioned in Sahih Tirmidhi, which is one of the Sihah as-Sittah, one of the 6 most authentic books from the Ahl Sunnah. Volume 2, the hadith number is 332 for the Beirut edition that I have. The narration states, أن النبي كان إذا سجد أمكن أنفه وجبهته من الأرض. When Rasulullah used to perform the sajda, he would ensure that his forehead and his nose would firmly be settled on the earth, on the sand. Min al-ard. Ard is earth or sand. And this is why it is from traditions like these, you will find that when sometimes people are praying, they will put 2 turbas, one for the nose and one for the forehead. The second part, that the nose should be on the turba, is part from the mustahabbat. And following in the same line, you will see that when the ghusl has been given to the mayyit and they are doing the hunut, after putting hunut on the 7 parts of sajda, they will put hunut mustahab also on the nose and then on the chest. But the fact that the hunut is put on the nose and the second turba is used for the nose is from the sunnah of Rasulullah, that when he would go into prostration, he would ensure that apart from his forehead firmly resting on the ground, his nose would touch the ground as well. This is the first narration. Second narration, again Sahih Tirmidhi, volume 2. This one is hadith number 317. Rasulullah is stated to have said, جُعِلَتْ لِي الْأَرْضُ كُلُّهَا مَسْجِدًا وَتَحُورًا. Rasulullah states that the earth has been created and has been made as a place of sujood and a place of tahara for me. If the earth is a masjid, he says that the earth is a masjid. Over here, the meme before the word sajada means place of performing sujood. Meme al-makan. For therefore, we find from the tradition that Rasulullah says anything that is considered to be earth qualifies to be a place of performing sajda. it qualifies for you to put your head down on that place to perform sajda. And then he goes on to say that the earth is tahura, the earth can be used for tahara. Meaning what? If a person loses water, he can use the earth to do tayammum. Tradition number 3, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Now a person might come up with an ishkal. And he says, okay, at that time, perhaps a person might say that carpets were not invented. There was no industry that could have manufactured carpets. And if they were manufactured during the time of Rasulullah, he would have allowed the companions to use. A person can come forward with this objection as well. We reply back by saying, even though there were no carpets, were there any times in the mosque where the people would perform sajda on their garments? Is this acceptable or no? Because the carpet is made from fabric and the clothes are also woven or stitched from fabric. Was there a time where Rasulullah or any one of the companions ever performed sajda on their garments? And perhaps from this we could get proof that it is permissible to do sajda on a carpet. Look at what the tradition says. This is narrated in Sunan al-Kubra, volume 2. The narrator is Ibn Abdullah al-Qarashi, renowned narrator from the Ilm al-Rijal as per the school of the Ahl Sunnah. He says, رَعَى النَّبِي رَجُلًا يَسْجُدْ عَلَى كُورِ عَمَامَتِهِ فَأَوْمَأَ بِيَدِهِ إِرْفَعْ عَمَامَتَكَ وَأَوْمَأَ إِلَى جَبْهَتِهِ. One time Rasulullah was in the mosque and he was watching or he was observing as a person was performing his salat. When this person went into sajda, we said the mosque at that time was what? It was all earth and sand. This person, when he went into sajda, he performed sajda on the front cloth of his amama. Meaning that he prostrated on cloth. He performed the sajda in the front part of the cloth of the amama. What happened? Rasulullah pointed towards him and said to him, lift your amama. Irfa amamatak wa awma'a ila jabhatihi. He told him, lift your amama, and he pointed towards the forehead. Meaning that the place that needs to touch the earth for sujood is what? The forehead. From traditions such as these, it becomes absolutely clear that even during the time of Rasulullah, he was not in favor of people performing sajda on any type of textile. In addition to this, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, and this is in Mustadrak al-Sahihain, he says, كنت أصلي مع النبي الظهر. I was reciting Salatul Dhuhr with the Holy Prophet. فأخذ فأخذ قبضة من حصى. I would take a number of pebbles في كفي, in my palm. لتبرد حتى أسجد عليه من شدة الحر. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari says, when I would pray Salatul Dhuhr with Rasulullah, while I was standing, I would take a number of pebbles in my palm, such that they become cold, they cool off. Because in the heat of the desert, when we would perform sajda, we said the mosque didn't have any shade. The mosque didn't have any roof. So sometimes the earth and the stones would become extremely hot due to the sun. Jabir ibn Abdullah says, when we used to pray, I used to pick those stones up and I hold them in my hand. At least they become a little bit cooler. When I go into sajda, I don't burn my forehead. To that extent, even though the way the ulama will say such a situation, you are still under the criteria of hukum awali. If a person is under the da'ira or under the bracket of hukm thanawi, the hukum changes. That is not the point of our discussion. Hukm thanawi, the original ruling as it stands, even during the time of intense heat, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari would not perform the sajda on his amama or on the garb of his abba. He He would hold the stone in his hand and perform sajda on the stone or on the earth. For from examples such as these, narrations such as these, it becomes extremely clear that even during the time of Rasulullah, sajda was performed on the earth and not on any other textile or manufactured item. Imam as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, states, and every word from any Ma'soom Imam is beautiful, but he very eloquently states the reason as to why sajda is required to be done on something that is non-edible and pure from the earth. They came to him once and they asked him, why can't you pray on anything that is edible or anything that can be worn? Imam as-Sadiq replies back by saying, what is, to paraphrase the event, this is found in Ilal al-Shara'i, Sheikh Saduq. To paraphrase, Imam as-Sadiq says to him, listen, why do we perform sajda? The whole idea of prostration is that it is a symbolization that you are purely worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It represents the highest order of worship towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says if you were to prostrate on something that is edible or something that is worn, he says in the dunya, people worship what they eat and they worship what they wear. Meaning that a person will spend his entire life and will sell his Lord enough. He will sell his Lord just so that he can fill his stomach. He will sell his Lord just that he can wear good clothes. So therefore, if you perform sajda on something that is edible or something that can be worn, it is as if you are prostrating to those things that take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a metaphoric understanding that when you perform sajda on earth, the earth as a form of purity is submission towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tayyib, a person understands, okay, that the sajda should be done on something that is earth, pure. Why is the emphasis on the sajdaga or the turba, which is Husayni? Why the turba from Karbala? There are a number of answers. If a person was looking for a dalil fiqhi, in that did any one of the imams perform sajda on the sand or the earth from Karbala? Yes. We have a tradition in Wasa'il al-Shi'ah that for our sixth imam, he used to have on his prayer mat a yellow cloth. And in this cloth, there was a handful of sand from the qabr of Imam al-Hussein. In Wasa'il al-Shi'ah, the tradition tells us, whenever it was the time of Salah, Imam al-Sadiq would open this piece of cloth and he would place it in front of him and perform the sajda on the handful of sand from the grave of Imam al-Hussein. Fi'l al-Imam hujjah. The action of an imam is hujjah and is a source of deriving the sharia. For from the actions of the imam, we find that it is mustahab. In fact, the opening tradition which we mentioned from our imam, he states that our Shi'as can never be free of four things. As in, there are four things that our Shi'as always comply by and pay great importance to them. Number one, خمرة التي يصلي بها الخمرة التي يصلي بها. Khumra is the stone or the place on which you perform sajda. So from here we understand the Imam says to even take care of the turba and the sajdagar on which you pray is absolutely important. A person needs to make sure that it is always within the bounds of tahara. Sometimes there's a lot of sweat that comes into a sajdaga and forms a barrier between the actual stone and the forehead. For a person needs to take care of the place on which he performs the sajda, number one. Number two, the Imam says, Al-Khatam, Alladhi yakhtum bihi. The ring is an important part of the Shia's identity. Our 11th Imam says that one of the signs of a mu'min is that he wears aqiq on his right. For number one, the sajdagar on which you do sajda. Number two, the ring. Number three, the brush. Siwak, alladhi yustaq bihi. The brush through which the oral hygiene is maintained is important. Number three, these are characteristics of the Shia that the Imam is saying. Number four, turbatu qabr al-Husayn, or at-tin min qabr al-Husayn. To have anything from the turba of Imam al-Husayn is from the signs of the Shia and the mu'min, regardless of whether it is a sajdaga or regardless of whether it is a tasbih. Imam al-Rida says, if you had a tasbih that is made from the turba of Imam al-Husayn, even if you were to hold the tasbih and move the beads without doing dhikr, the fact that it is from the turba of Imam al-Husayn, the angel on your shoulder writes for you the thawab of a tasbih, without you having to recite anything. In addition to all this, the Imams were adamant for the Shia to perform sajda and to perform their daily prayers using the sand of Imam al-Husayn as the sajdaga, as the turba, for an important reason. They wanted to ensure that the Shias of Ali Muhammad will never forget the advent of Imam al-Husayn. Remember Imam Hussein 5 times a day. Because when you put that sajdaga down in front of you and you prepare yourself for salat and you do your takbiratul ihram, when you look at that sajdaga, it must click in your mind that this salat that you are praying today would not have been possible had it not been for the sacrifice of Imam al-Husayn. Ashhadu annaka kad aqamta as-salat wa atayta az-zakat wa amarta bil ma'ruf wa nahita anil munkar. Mujaddid al-Shirazi rahmatullah alayh, who was a marja taqleed in Karbala al-Muqaddas and used to be the Imam al-Jama'ah in the Haram Sharif of Imam al-Husayn, whenever he would perform the takbir or before he would do the niyyah and the takbiratul ihram of his salat, he would always say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, and then do the niyyah and then the takbiratul ihram. They would ask him, Sayyid, why? Why this salam before you do your ziyarah? Mujaddid rahmatullah alayhi turned around and said to him, had it not been for Hussein, would we have a salat to pray today? Allah. For every time you put this turba and this sajdaga down in front of you to recite salah, remember Imam Hussein's ihsan on the ummah. This was perhaps one of the greatest secrets or philosophies behind why there was so much importance from the Imams to use this turba al-muqaddas to perform sajda. Having said this, today being the first day of Shahr Safar, another chapter of grief in the lives of Ahlul Bayt. Perhaps less than 19 to 20 days, the lovers of Imam al-Husayn from every corner of the world are preparing for the Ziyarah Arba'iniyah. Inshallah, we shall have a few lectures on the significance of the Ziyarah in itself. But historically it is narrated that it was on a day like today, the 1st of Safar, that the Sabaya, the women and Imam Zainul Abidin and the children of Ahlul Bayt, it was on a day like this that they reached the land of Sham. Having left the prisons of Kufa, it is narrated that the women were taken through all the major cities between Iraq and Sham, to the extent that they reached towards the border of Lebanon, Ba'al-Bak, where one of the daughters of Imam al-Hussein is buried over there as well. By Halab, it is narrated that when they approached Damascus by Bab Tuma, Sayyid Abdul Razak al-Mukarram states that the Sabaya entered Damascus through Bab Tuma. Bab Tuma is a present-day Christian settlement which is literally next to the Haram Sharif of Sayyidah Ruqayya. The tradition tells us that the Ahlul Bayt reached Sham on the 1st of Safar. And when they reached the gates of Bab Tuma, the border of Damascus, the capital, they were made to wait outside for a period of 3 days. Ahlul Bayt was made to wait on the borders of Damascus for 3 days. As they were coming in, Shimr bin Dhil Joshan was asked, La'natullah alayhi, why is it that the women and the children are waiting at the borders of the city? Shimr said to them that we have to decorate the city before that the captives are brought inside. It is narrated, Allama al-Ha'iri says that for 3 days orders were given and the Mu'addin gave an announcement for the city of Sham that this is a day of joy and this is a day of Eid. For indeed, he would say, Amirul Mu'minin wal-Ayadu Billah Yazid ibn Muawiyah la'natullah alayh has gained victory over the Khariji Ayadu Billah Hussein ibn Ali. So Yazid's command was that the entire city of Sham needs to be decorated and the people need to be in a joyous manner to come and look at the captives. Allama al-Ha'iri says for 3 days the people of Sham decorated the cities, they wore their newest clothes, and on the 1st of Safar when the women were to be brought into the palace of Yazid, Allama al-Ha'iri says that the people came out beating drums, singing songs, dancing and blowing their trumpets. In this fashion, the heads of the shuhada were brought inside. The first head that was placed on the spear was the head of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. It was at the head of the caravan. At the end of the caravan or at the end of the procession was another head on a spear, and that was the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada. In the middle were the women and Imam al-Sajjad bound by ropes around their necks. It is narrated that at one of the times a woman, an old woman, Shami, Amawiya, from the lineage of Bani Umayyah, came to Shimr bin Dhil Joshan. She looked at the head of Imam al-Hussein. The narrator describes that when the head of Imam al-Hussein was brought on a spear, the hair and his beard would be blowing because of the wind, and the head would be tilting from side to side on the head of a spear. This Amawi lady asked Shimr bin Joshan, whose head is this? Shimr bin Dhil Joshan said, this is the head of the Khariji Hussein ibn Ali. The woman looked at Shimr. She said to him, this person, his father Ali ibn Abi Talib, is responsible for killing my father in the battle of Siffin. She said to Shimr, do you give me permission, or do you give me permission to lower the head from the spear? Shimr says, what do you want to do? The woman says, I want to throw a stone on the forehead of this person, Hussein. The tradition tells us that Shimr lowered the head of Imam al-Hussein from the spear. The Amawi woman took a stone on her hand. The narration tells us that she threw it with all her energy towards the forehead of Imam al-Hussein. The narration tells us that blood began to come down or flow down from the forehead. When Kulthum saw this, she fainted. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون ولعنة الله على قوم الظالمين. ماتم حسين.